the last video, we deployed our application. We created pipeline with GitHub Actions to deploy it automatically. And now we are going to move forward with developing the functionality for our application. And the next thing I want to do is to add here an infinite pagination. So every time when we click the button More, our application will download more pictures and show it to user. If you are familiar with APIs with pagination, you probably know that the most common way to do it is just to pass from your client two variables to your backend, and these two variables are limit and offset. A limit usually means how many pictures we want to download on one page, and offset means how many items from the beginning of the list we want to skip. So let's say if we have limit 10 and offset 100, it means that we want to download 10 items starting with 100 first one. That's how we usually do pagination if our API works with SQL database. But for NoSQL databases like DynamoDB, we will use different approach. We will have the limit variable as well, but instead of the offset, we will have the start key. And this start key variable will contain a primary key of the first item that we want to start our page with. So instead of just the number of items, we're passing to our backend the ID of the item that will be first on our page. And then starting from this item, we will show 10 or 20 or whatever amount of items. So let's start with our backend, and I also wanted to do a little bit of refactoring. So let's run our server, and let's take a look at these two functions, save photo and get photos. They have something in common. We create a new DynamoDB client in both of them, and we also have this return statement where we return our headers, and they are basically the same, and status code and body, so the shape of this response is the same. So what I want to do now is to move this repeated logic to a separate file, to a separate function, and let's start with this return. Let's create a new file here and call it, let's say, send response, and here we will export a simple function that will accept status code, body and headers, and all we want to do is just return this stuff. We can copy it from here, for example. So headers are gonna be these, and we also will add ability to define custom headers via this helper. Body will be just body, and status code will be just status code. So now, after we created this function, we can import it here, and we will replace this return with this function, and we will just pass it 200, then it's gonna be body, and we can actually add JSON stringify to the function. Do not repeat it everywhere. So, and headers we can just skip as they are not a required thing. We will just make them, here we will make them default empty object, and this part we delete. So instead of this return that took us like 10 lines, we have this little send response function that does the same thing. And here, instead of this thing, we will also copy it over and we'll pass error instead of results. And our status code will be 400. We can also do the same here for get photos. We will send this response, but instead of just passing results, we will pass whatever we are passing here. And delete what's not needed. Yeah, of course we should require it here as well. So let's check if it still works. Yeah, it returns the response, and here we can upload the same cat file. Amazing. So the next step for refactoring, to create a file with constants. Let's do it, and I'll put it in utils for now as well. And here I just want to set all these environment variables that we've got here. Let's say process and photos table. And in our save photo we've got two more. And of course this one too. So if we ever need to change them, we change them only in one place instead of every function. And actually let's do it a bit different. Let's create a folder const, and here inside of this folder I'll create a file that I'll call let's say pass, and these things is basically a path for our S3 buckets. I'll delete it from here. So now let's replace it here with our photos table, and we'll import it const pass. And the same thing we gonna do here, just gonna be original bucket name, thumbnail bucket name, and we can just replace it here, get rid of this original bucket name. And for this table as well, we are using it here, and we can just do it this way. And I think we've got some more environment variables here, thumbnail bucket name. So again, let's just copy our stuff and delete this thing. And with our variable, our constant, I just replace it here. So that's it. That's our quick refactoring of environment variables. Let's again check everything, still working. Our sharp module again is not happy about something. And our get request, working as well, amazing. And the last bit of refactoring, let's create another file here. I'll call it providers. I don't know, maybe there is a better name for it, but I just don't know how to call it. And here, whatever we create from AWS SDK, we will just move to this file. And of course, we have to import there our SDK. And we're gonna export it. S3, recognition, and Dynamo. So we can just save our time and our lines of code and import it the same way. S3, recognition, and Dynamo from our providers file. And then we just use them same way as before. And for get photos, we'll do the same thing. Just instead of all these S3 and recognition, we need only DynamoDB. I think that's it for now. Again, testing. It works, but I see this warning, and I think I probably put it to the wrong place. These course settings in previous video. Yeah, it says configuration got moved. So instead of our functions, we set up the course on provider level. Before it was different, we had to set up it for every function. Now we can just set it up once. Let's try. And where is my serverless stuff? Okay, I added it here, and I will delete it here. And let's restart and see if we have warning or not. So I don't see the warning, and what I suggest us to do is to deploy our CI/CD pipeline. Will deploy it, and after it gets deployed, we will check if our course settings are still working fine. So now if we go to our deployed client and try to load something, and okay, I see here where we refactored it in get photos. I just passed it as a results items, and it returns it as a body. And our front end expects us to get data results. So results is now this extra path here. Let's quickly fix it in the client. Images list. But the good thing is that our course is not broken. We can get our response. So let's now just fix this error of undefined. Waiting for it to deploy. Okay, it's done. And let's check. Now it's working perfectly. That's what we expected to see. Now we can move to the actual work on the pagination. And again, we will start with our backend. So I go to the get photos, and I'm gonna close others. So here we want to get from our query parameters, we want to get two parameters, limit and start key. So let's get it. how we access query parameters in Lambda. We can access it through this event. Actually, we can console log the event just for you to see what it contains. And now let's go to Postman and add our limit. Let's say 5 and our start key. I don't know, whatever. For now, it's not doing anything. Yes, and of course we need to run the server. Yeah, so I printed out our event object, so you can see query string parameters contains whatever we pass here in the URL, and we can destructure it from there, and we can replace our limit with this limit, and in case if there is nothing, can just put 10. And what we do with the start key, here this start key is going to be primary key in our table. So let's create it. We want to create this property, and it's going to be primary key here, and here it will be the actual start key. Then here in the parameters that we pass in our scan, we can just do something like that. If we have start key, then we pass our exclusive start key, and if not, then we pass empty array or empty object. We don't need this AWS. That was autocomplete. So now if you go to our Postman, and you see there are many items, photos. It's more than 5 for sure. So now if you click it again, we get nothing because of this start key, because we don't have this actual start key. But if we remove it, we will get 5 items from our database. And now if we pass this start key, we're gonna get next 5 items. So every time when we are gonna click on our button more here, we're gonna pass the ID of this item and the limit, whatever we set it up. But how does the front end know if we have some more items to show, or this one is the last one? We need to let the client know about it, and this is also very simple. Here our results, if we console log them, and we will remove the event because we don't want to mess much our console. So now, if we console log the results, you can see that it has items. It has items that we return to client, and it has some extra information: count, scanned count, and this last evaluated key. And if we, let's say, pass this one, and it will return us the last 2 items, you see that we already do not have this last evaluated key because our table is over. We don't have any more items to show. So that's how we can detect it, and we can just pass this to our client. Let's add it here to our response. So here we need to add this last key that we're getting from results, and the body, it will be now a bit different. So it's going to be the object that has items, and it's going to have last key. That will be equal to our results, last related key, and if it exists, we will return primary key. And now let's try it. And you see we get the items, last two items, and it doesn't return any last evaluated key because this is last items. And if we remove this parameter, we will get the last key that we can pass here as a start key. And it will get us 5 next items, and again the next start key will be this one, and we are getting the last items. So that's how we're gonna loop through our table when we're clicking this more button. And now when it's done on the backend, let's commit it, and let's go to our client and do changes there. Now we have to do some more work on our client, and let's go to our image list. Here we again changed something. We changed items here, so we have to fix it. And we're getting this Kennedy structure property because we do not pass any query string parameters. So let's add them. Let's pass them here in our API. And we can actually fix it on the backend here where we destructured them. We can just do this. It fixed our error. Now let's add our query parameters. And first I want to add a little util function. So let's add the util function here. Encode query params. And to be honest, I will just copy paste this function from another project where I probably copy pasted it from Stack Overflow, but anyway, it doesn't matter. It will just turn our object, our JavaScript object, into the string that we will add to our URL here. So now here we're gonna add a template string. And the first part of this string is going to be the same, our constant, and the second part is our encode query param function, where we will pass an object, and for now it's going to be just limit. And now let's see, we're gonna get 5 only images, and yes, we're getting 5 of them, so that's working. We want somehow get the last key, and the last key we have to get from this response from here where we are loading our data. So if we open the documentation for our use query, this is 4th, yes. So we can see here we're passing query key, query function, and what else we can pass. If you take a look at this example, here it passes query key, and this object is the context, and we could do the same. We could pass here, we could pass an object, so we could pass our limit here, and instead of hard coding it here, we could just get it from the context. We get this query key here. And from query key we could destructure our stuff. So we just need this here. And then we can just do the same thing here. We can just, let's add some return here. And we'll return our fetch. So here we need limit that we will replace here. And this is not happy, let's do it any. for now. And now let's see if we still get 5 pictures here. Yes, our limit now comes from our front end. So we can change it here instead of hard-coded value here. And now we need to do the same, but for the last key. Our React query library has the functionality out of the box exactly for this case, and it is called useInfiniteQuery. We can just search for it. useInfiniteQuery. And what we're gonna do is to replace our use query with our useInfiniteQuery. And let's do it. Let's replace it here and see what's happening. The response here is a little bit different, so we're getting some extra data from it. So we're getting this stuff that we will just copy here now, just to try. And does it have ease loading? Yes, it also has ease loading. And let's print our result. What is going to be in this result? And it's gonna be, we get an array of pages here. So our result contains data, and data contains pages and page parameters. And what we basically want to do is to show all the pages on our screen. So let's change it to the data again. And here we could do kind of a loop through data pages and then map, and then instead of this map we could add page, and then inside of the page we would loop through these things, so something like that. And let's, we do not have result, we have data here again. So let's try. So you can see it's working now. So we loop through all pages, because now instead of just items, this useInfiniteQuery returns us pages, and we loop through every page, and then on every page we loop through items, and that's how it works. And now we need to add on click for our button. We want to fetch next page, and we already have this fetch next page returned, and it's not happy, because it is expecting something else. So we do this, so we'll do this function. Every time we click we will fetch next page, and it comes from here, from our hook. But I'm afraid it's not gonna work right now. It's not gonna do anything, because every time we want to fetch next page, we want to pass our last key to this query. And if we again refer to our documentation, we can see that here we have this get next page parameter. This parameter we can pass a function, a callback function, that will have 2 arguments, last page and all pages. And from this last page we can just get our last key. So here we just return our last key, and in our function here it's gonna be passed as page param. And if we console log it, we can try to see what is there. So let's restart. First it's going to be undefined. Then if we click here, it's going to be the key. So we can use it as start key here. So let's try. and you can see it loads more pictures. And now you see if we click a few times to our more button and all pictures are loaded, we can't load more, so we want to hide this button. And how we're gonna do that? Here we have this has next page, and we can just use ternary. If it has next page, then we show the button, and if not, we show the null. And let's try again. You see our button disappeared, and we can just load our pictures while we have them. So that's it. That's our pagination. Let's delete console log, and here instead of any we can try to type it. If you take a look here in our type definitions, we see that query function context type interface accepts two parameters. It's generic, so the first one is query key and the second one is page param. And so here we have this query key that is an array always, and the first is string, the first part of this array, and the second one is our custom object with limit that is number. And the second part of this type is our page param that is string, or if you see here, it can be undefined as well. And now this part is red because this function encode query params expect us to have this thing always. It shouldn't be undefined or whatever. So here it doesn't want us to pass undefined, so we can just do a little check here, and if page param exists, so it's non-nullable, we will return this, and if it does not, we will return an empty object, and this should work. Let's check again our pagination if it still works. Yes, it is. And here is a little warning from React that we can also fix, probably about this span. Yes, it was about the span, so we fixed this little warning and everything is good, and we can tell that we are ready with our pagination and we can deploy it. Okay, deploy failed because of this thing. We can disable it for this line. Okay, the stuff deployed. And that's our remote URL. Checking again, and everything is fine. So we made our pagination with our NoSQL database, DynamoDB, using the start key, so-called cursor, and with useInfiniteQuery from the React Query library. I hope it was useful for you, and don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Thank you.